reality test that I would like to do while Courtney is still here. I want to be sure, I want to confirm that what she's getting as her audio up here that she uses for these feeds really is just a split of the stereo out. Because the program out that we offer is that's not us, right? She's getting audio, you're not providing anything on the air. She really is getting this. That's what I wanted to hear. Because that was the reason why I couldn't do what they wanted us to do at Quarantine, because I couldn't pick out any stereo of the audio. So I just needed to know what they're feeding in the video. I guess the final test would be to pull the CD out of the stereo and see if she screams about not having audio. Hollow. Cool, yeah, keep it going. The stream is working now, but there's this weird audio artifact that flutters in and flutters out that feels like packets.
What else can we do when we're feeling low? So take a deep breath and let it go. You shouldn't be drowning on your own. And if you feel you're into
We don't have to worry about nothing. 'Cause we got the fire, and we burning one hell of a something. They're gonna see us from outer space, light it up. Like we're the stars of the human race, human race. When the lights turning down, they don't know what they heard. Strike the march, play it loud, giving love to the world. We'll be raising our hands, shining up to the sky. 'Cause we got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire, fire. And we're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. Gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We don't wanna leave, no. We just wanna be right now, right now. And what we see is everybody's on the floor acting crazy, getting loco till the lights out. Music's on, I'm waking up. We start the fire, then we burn it up. When it's over now, we got the love. There's no sleeping now, no sleeping now. When the lights turn down, they don't know what they heard. Strike the march, play it loud, giving love to the world. We'll be raising our hands, shining up to the sky. 'Cause we got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire, fire. And we're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. Gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. When the lights turn down, they don't know what they heard. Strike the march, play it loud, giving love to the world. We're gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We can light it up, 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 so they can't put it out, out, out. We can light it up, 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 so they can't put it out, out, out. We can light it up, 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 so they can't put it out, out, out. We can light it up, 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 so they can't put it out, out, out. When the lights turning down, they don't know what they heard. Strike the march, play it loud, giving love.
is what you came for. Lightning strikes every time she moves, and everybody's watching her, but she's looking at you. This is what you came for. Lightning strikes every time she moves, and everybody's watching her,
rama. Doesn't lucky nafta njenga. Ninakunzoi lucky nafta rama. Doesn't lucky nafta kona. Rocky munore wane pikora. Rocky munore tora pikora. Rocky munore wane pikora. Ninakunzoi lucky nafta rama. Doesn't lucky nafta kona. Ninakunzoi lucky nafta rama. Doesn't lucky nafta njenga.
Ochamundu yera bamel pa mi, nega di tudo gintis ginti garandi. Ochamundu yera bamel pa mi, nega di tudo gintis ginti garandi. Cada quien cuchaman pa consignar, naranja barullo que da pool di party. Cada quien cuchaman pa consignar, naranja barullo que da pool di party. Diana chaman y falanca, es mundo kuno ya sing y catabejo. Diana chaman y falanca, es mundo kuno ya sing y catabejo. Cuanto más sentido kuno pureza, burranja fama, más segundade. Cuanto más sentido kuno pureza, burranja fama, más segundade. Si casim na bem fica tiraço. sabe corpo na bisao. Ali gosta em nada. Quem descuidou? Descuida na sabe corpo na bisao. Ali gosta em nada. Ali gosta em nada. Gosta em de fácil ninguém. Rabla terás, cojanha companheiro sou, cojanha amigo sou, é camaradas. Tudo lado com tapa, saba, eta som namba, tudo cala, 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 que te escutanga, bamba, tudo muri. Malingo assim fica tiraço, traço, sumalimaria.
Welcome to Jones Auditorium at Meredith College. Please take a moment to locate the exit nearest you, keeping in mind it may not be the one through which you entered. Cell phones, laptops, tablets, and any other devices with LCD screens should be silenced and put away at this time, as they are a distraction to those around you and the performers on stage. The use of unauthorized recording devices and photography are strictly prohibited. Thank you and enjoy the event.
Good evening and welcome to Meredith College. I'm delighted that you're joining us tonight on our beautiful campus to help us celebrate our 12th year of honoring an outstanding woman of achievement. Since its inception in 2007, this award has been given to extraordinary women who've made significant contributions to their fields and to the critical message that women contribute enormous talent, research, art, and understanding to our world. Our recipients' areas of influence cut across a wide range of disciplines. The diversity among our award winners is intentional, as we recognize the many ways that in addition to their concrete achievements, women in our midst show courage, compassion, and dedication to the larger community. Our recipient tonight, Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, is special to all of us at Meredith who helped imagine, shape, and implement Strong Points, the college's signature coaching model for undergraduate students. With guided mentoring and peer support, Strong Points calls on students to apply their individual strengths to create a personalized four-part plan, including an academic plan for their majors, minors, and courses of study, an experiential learning plan for what they want to learn outside the classroom, a financial plan to ensure their security and options, and a career plan that leads to their knowledge and passions into well-paying jobs that inspire them. This signature program, Strong Points, combines the research from three critical areas. First, we tap strengths research, showing that building on one's strengths leads to lives of inspiration and success. The second area is appreciative inquiry, research focusing on what is good and right about an idea, or in our students' cases, about themselves. Third is Dr. Fredrickson's work on positivity that reveals the psychological impact of believing in oneself, in one's strengths, in order to create a life of meaning and impact. Dr. Fredrickson is a noted psychologist recognized for her work in positivity and for her more recent research reframing the notion of love and its impact on our health. Just a few highlights of Dr. Fredrickson's achievements include that she's among the most highly cited scholars in psychology. In 2014, she was identified as the 13th most influential psychologist alive, contributing to counseling psychology. And only somebody in positivity could take such joy from being number 13, right? She's published more than 100 peer-reviewed articles, and her general audience books on positive psychology have been translated for more than 30 foreign markets. Her influence has been felt by more than 170,000 learners worldwide through a free online course on positive psychology. Her research has been recognized with numerous national and international honors. She's known for her broaden and build theory of positive emotions, which are foundational within positive psychology as a blueprint showing how pleasant emotional states contribute to resilience, well-being, and health. She holds a PhD in psychology from Stanford University with a minor in organizational behavior. She did postdoctoral work in psychophysiology at the University of California at Berkeley, and she graduated summa cum laude from Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota. Today, she makes her residence here in North Carolina and serves as the Keenan Distinguished Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, following stints as a faculty member at Duke and the University of Michigan. Tonight, she is Meredith Outstanding Woman of Achievement. Thank you. The Academy Awards, you know, so it's beautiful. And I will keep it for you back here. How's that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for this tremendous honor and that warm introduction and the warm faces I see in the audience. It's a real honor to be recognized in this way at this really remarkable campus that has, devoted itself so much to strengths and the heart of positive psychology. So it's a real honor to be here. And I'm going to be tackling this question, why prioritize positivity? Along the way, I'll share with you some research from my laboratory, and I want to make clear from the start that it's very much a team effort. This is not the kind of information I could share with you if I had just been working on my own. So I have a very large and vibrant team of doctoral students, undergraduate research assistants, world-class collaborators, and I've also benefited from generous funding from the National Institutes of Health over the years. So if you like some of the kinds of findings that you're hearing, thank the National Institutes of Health for supporting this work, and also this fabulous team of doctoral students who are now on their way in their own careers. You'll see their names on the bottom of the slides at different points. But one of the things I want to start with a recognition of is thinking about positivity for an hour can sometimes seem misplaced because we're living in such turbulent times. There's a lot of difficulty and pain that we're all absorbing at a cultural level in terms of the cultural difficulties that we face, but also at personal levels because, in this room, I'm certain there's pockets of deep suffering in different locations. If we know we're not in that moment of despair right now, we know we could be because this is part of the human condition. So sometimes in the face of all this negativity, we get in moments where we feel in full despair. And the only path out of despair is to bring in positivity, is to bring in hope. And what hope is, it's not turning a blind eye to the difficulties that you face, either individually or as a society or as a community. It's looking at those difficulties with clear eyes, but also yearning for something better and taking action towards creating something better. So hope is one form of positivity that very much is holding the negative and the positive side by side, and then using that the energy and the openness and the forward-lookingness that hope provides as a springboard to action and to compassion. And one other reason why sometimes focus on positivity might seem misplaced is because we have this jump for joy kind of American version of positivity in our minds a lot of times when we imagine what positivity is like. It's either the yellow smiling face or jump for joy. But I wanted to remind you that there are many other forms and flavors of positivity, and it's important to recognize it in its full variety because there are these exuberant forms of positivity, but there are also the quieter moments where you just feel deep in your bones grateful for your current circumstances, or you just are at peace and you're recognizing that this moment, where I am now, is okay and safe, and let me relish and savor that. There's also, simple moments like sharing a laugh with a friend, or being inspired by a great leader, or supporting somebody with compassion. I mean, that's equally a positive emotion. And one of the important features of these states of uplift, of pleasant uplift, is that they are momentary. They arise in us, and they crest and they dissipate, just like a wave on the ocean. So sometimes when people think, prioritizing positivity or aiming for happiness, it's about achieving this kind of nonstop positive state. That's not humanly possible. Emotions come and go. And so rather than think about prolonging them, we need to be thinking about experiencing even mild positive emotional states more frequently. That's where the real energy lies, and the realistic way of thinking about positivity and prioritizing it in daily life. And as President Allen mentioned, my work has focused on what I call the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. This is a framework on how it is that humans around the world have positive emotions. What is it? How have they been advantageous for humans across the course of evolution, and how can they be adaptive and useful for us in present day times? And so my two books, Positivity and Love 2.0, are centered on this theory, and I will give you just some pieces of research that have informed my thinking and teaching over the last several decades. One fundamental fact about positive emotions that I think often goes unnoticed is that, of course, they feel good. Of course, positive emotions have a pleasant feel, and that's maybe the main reason why we want to experience them, but there's something much more important going on inside the way positive emotions change the way the human brain works. Positive emotions open our awareness. They expand our awareness. Just like this water lily will come open with the presence and absence of sunlight, our minds open and close with the presence and absence of positive emotions. And we know this from behavioral studies, we know this from eye tracking studies, we know this from brain imaging studies, studies where we randomize people to experience neutral or negative or positive states. So we know that there's a causal relationship between uplifted emotional states and expanded awareness. And expanded awareness is a temporary feature of positive emotions, but with it comes many other helpful consequences. One is that we're able to see more possibilities. When we are experiencing a neutral state, maybe we'll see like one, maybe two signs on that signpost, but when we're experiencing positive emotional states, we see lots of possible directions we can take. And so we feel more at liberty to choose what's the best path. Negative emotions will often give us just one thing that we want to do. We get kind of fixated on one action when we're feeling negative. And that opens up creativity. The studies have demonstrated that the ability to see broader in our peripheral field actually helps us connect disparate ideas and come up with novel solutions to unusual situations. So people become more creative when they're experiencing a positive emotion. And that creates more openness. One place of that openness is in terms of openness to new ideas. You're able to listen better. Openness to other people's opinions if they are coming from a different point of view or a different culture or a different history than you. That openness is something that we really cherish in our community, especially in our classrooms. And another way this openness shows up is that people think less in terms of, what's me and mine and you and yours, and more in terms of us and we and together. We're able to see beyond just, our own self-focused considerations. One of the additional features of the broaden and build theory, so what I've shared with you so far are ways that positive emotions in the moment change the way your brain works and changes your outlook towards everyday life. Now, those are temporary effects. So if you move from feeling a positive emotion to something neutral or negative, those effects are gone. But What's interesting is that those moments of an open mindset function like nutrients. They help put us on a positive trajectory of growth. And so over time, little by little, when we have a regular daily diet of positive emotions, we are building our resources, building our resilience. And so this metaphor of positive emotions as being like eating your fruits and vegetables is a really vital one, because we can't save up our positive emotions for vacation or the weekend. We need to be thinking about having them part of our daily life. And I hope to convince you even more so why that's the case. One thing that we found, and these are through randomized controlled trials, where we, by random assignment, one group of people who are interested in being in a study for a whole season, they'll learn techniques to self-generate positive emotions more in daily life. We've used different forms of meditation to help people learn to cultivate their own positive emotions more. And we find that not only does that help people raise their positive emotions, which was our goal, but also that changes the way they see their daily connections in daily life. And by creating more closeness or feeling more in tune with others, people's heart rhythms are improved. We're measuring this in terms of heart rate variability, a very subtle shift in heart rate that is in rhythm with your breathing, so that when you breathe in, your heart speeds up a little bit, and when you breathe out, it slows down. Now, that is related to cardiovascular health. It's also related to your body's ability to regulate glucose and inflammation. So it's a clear biological marker of physical health that's also very attuned to our social and emotional abilities. And so we find that when people learn to self-generate more positive emotions in daily life, a season later, their cardiovascular health is stronger. We're also seeing really promising effects at the level of gene expression in the immune system. What we have found is that the degree to which positive emotions are correlated with people's ability to find meaning and purpose and see their role as their life as part of a larger whole, then we see a connection between positive emotions and healthy patterns of gene expression in our white blood cells. And there's some very intriguing work done by a few of my colleagues where they've randomly assigned people to engage in two different forms of generating more positive emotions in daily life. One form is a little more self-focused. Do some kind things for yourself in the next 4 weeks, all on 1 day a week. You know, pick one day where you're just going to kind of lavish yourself in kindness. And then another group, by random assignment, is assigned to be kind to others and to do unexpected kind acts for other people. And what they found was, and they also had a neutral comparison group who just cataloged their day. And what they found was those who were engaged in kind acts for others, only that group showed shifts in gene expression in the immune system. So there's a way in which our proactive social and connecting positive emotions is something that's registered at a cellular level and shifts our cellular makeup in ways that can promote health. Okay. Another thing that's really fascinating outcome, I think, is that people's day-to-day positive emotions are not just about, fun and games. They actually build up our resilience and build up our ability to handle and address the difficulties that we'll all face at different moments. So if we want to know how to be more resilient to life challenges, one path towards that is to increase your positive emotions in day-to-day life and just know how to prioritize those. The work of one of my doctoral students brought to the table in my research team has looked at the role of positive emotions in promoting what we call positive spontaneous thoughts. So like the more you enjoy something, like your favorite hobby, or maybe it's running, maybe it's cooking, Maybe it's learning astrophysics. The more you enjoy that, the more that thoughts about that activity spontaneously pop to mind. And those thoughts aren't just kind of pleasant distractions. Those thoughts are intrinsic motivation. They're kind of little reminders. Let me go do that again. So this is one way how enjoying a task ends up creating this sort of automatic motivation to engage in it further. That doesn't happen when you just have neutral spontaneous thoughts or negative spontaneous thoughts. Those spontaneous thoughts need to be pleasant for this to unleash intrinsic motivation. And all of this, we've found, is a way in which positive experiences fuel what we call upward spirals, in that psychologists for decades had known that there's kind of like this downward spiral that occurs for people. A good example of it is with depression. People get pessimistic. They start thinking of the worst in a situation that brings their mood down further. The further their mood is down, the more pessimistic they get, and there's this way in this spirals down, and sometimes into clinical depression. What we found is that there is an opposing effect in the positive direction, where when people are experiencing positive emotions with that openness that creates, that helps you experience the next positive emotion, and it kind of keeps building. One thing that's different about the upward spiral than the downward spiral is the downward spiral is really self-insulating. It kind of pulls people away from others, whereas an upward spiral is more permeable and connects people to community more. So I used to think, when I wrote Positivity, my first book, I used to think of all positive emotions as very similar. And then I started working with the meditation practice Loving Kindness, and that over time convinced me that there's something special about positive emotions that we co-experience with others, or that involve sort of a mutual care and concern. And so just like nutritionists will say, you know, it's really important to eat your fruits and vegetables, but there are some that are like superfoods that you should really have in your diet, whether it's blueberries or avocados or almonds. I think that keeps changing. But what I think is true among positive emotions is that we have a superfood among them. If all positive emotions are serving as nutrients, love is serving as a superfood, a really super rich nutrient. And so I want to shift now and talk. I've shared things that are true of all forms of positivity, and now I want to shift and describe some of the thinking that I've taken on with my book Love 2.0, and now directs much of the research in my lab. And first I want to give you some examples of positivity resonance. Positivity resonance are those moments in time when you are in positive connection with others. That could be laughing with a friend. It could be, you know, hugging your neighbor or coworker with compassion. I think the clearest example of it is smiling at a baby, because when you're smiling at a baby, there's no roles, there's no expectations. It's very much human-to-human connection. And of course, this doesn't even have to be your baby. It can be the baby on the plane or the baby sitting next to us at the restaurant this afternoon. And there's a dance to it. There's a rhythm to how to connect, make eye contact, see those smiles, shared smiles. And what we know is that babies live off this stuff. Their cognitive development depends on having these warm and responsive connections with their caregivers. So it's definitely functioning like fertilizer for growth for infants. And one of my arguments here is that it's not just about growing infants. This is about a superfood that's just so vital for all of us, all through our lifespans. And so what I've been doing with my thinking on my rethinking of love is to bring together what I think are some really essential insights from one area of psychology, which is called relationship science, and another area of psychology where I sit, which is emotion science, and bringing those two together. From relationship science, there are two views that I think are really worth elevating and bringing into the conversation about love as an emotion. or shared positive emotions. And one is that there's some researchers who've looked at all different kinds of love relationships, like the love you have for a romantic partner, the love you have for your family members, the love you have for your best friend, or even your pet. And they've tried to isolate what is it that's fundamental to considering that relationship to be a love relationship. And what they found is that if you subtract this feature of being invested in the well-being of the other just for their own sake, then people will say, no, that's not love. That you have to care about the well-being of the other. And that, so you don't love someone because they make you breakfast in the morning or some other, exchange practicality, that it comes from being concerned about someone's well-being. And so just like this is an essential feature of a love relationship, there's the flip side of that has also been charted by relationships researcher, and that is, in jargon phrase, it's called perceived responsiveness. But if you take it out of the jargon phrase, you'd say, oh, this person really gets me. They understand me, they validate me, they care for me. And that those, in a way, that's the flip side of recognizing that somebody else is invested in your well-being. You feel seen and you feel cared for. And what I think is missing from this view, from relationship science, is that in this area of psychology, we often think of close relationships, love relationships, as a status. It's something that you achieve, and then it's just part of your life. What emotion science adds is, I think, a more honest reckoning about it. These are moments. There are moments when we feel seen. There are moments when we're actively caring for others, and those ebb and flow. Now, certainly, commitments last and are durable, but we need to recognize that there are some emotional ups and downs that make us feel connected, more connected or not. And another thing that emotion science can add is that these aren't just ideas or statuses in our mind. They are deeply embodied experiences, and emotions are, by definition, both a mind and a body experience at the same time. And if we think of these moments of connection as being more richly embodied, then I think we can understand more about their value, and I'll share some research that goes in that direction with you. And then in addition, I add to it my signature broaden and build perspective, and what's key in that is that there are some aspects of these moments of what I call positivity resonance, or these micro moments of love, that are features of it while you're experiencing it during that wave. And then there are others that accumulate over time the more you have that experience. So there's 2 time points at which these moments matter. And so to get just to the definitions of what I'm calling positivity resonance, or these co-experienced positive emotions, they're interpersonally situated experiences marked by a momentary increase in 3 things. One is shared positive emotions. This doesn't mean that 2 people have the identical positive emotions, but there's a strand of positivity that runs through each person. That there are also moments marked by behavioral and biological synchrony. And by that, I'll give you some examples of that in a moment, but it's basically a way in which 2 or more individuals kind of are acting, and at a physiological state, kind of acting as one in one same pattern. And then there's also this piece of mutual care and concern. That's the investment in the well-being of the other, and then feeling seen, which the combination of those 2 have been identified as like the hallmark of intimacy. And I'm suggesting here that there are moments that feel more intimate, where you feel more cared for, and there are moments that you maybe are off doing your own thing and not really engaged with another person at that point. And so those are the momentary features. Over time, having more moments like this builds a sense of embodied rapport, sort of an energized feeling of like, oh, we really clicked, we really connected. It also builds social bonds. So a lot of times people will think of love as the social bond. I'm actually arguing there's some more elemental building block that helps create that social bond. And that also helps to build commitment, loyalty, trust. These things that seem like the intangibles that we can never actually directly create. We can't just say, trust me, and have someone trust you. That trust emerges through experiences like this. And so this is where I'm arguing that, that instead of thinking of love as just like this large, unimaginable part of life that we just can't quite, it's so ineffable, we can't describe it, I'm arguing that we can understand it in terms of these momentary building blocks. And so our love relationships, I argue, are crystallized and formed and grow stronger when we have more of these micro moments of positive connection or positivity resonance. And so one of the features that I said was characteristic of these is behavioral synchrony, and this is one my research team and I have studied. We have done some studies where we've brought people into the laboratory as strangers, had them engage in a get-to-know-you conversation, and then also we're videotaping them, and they know we're videotaping them. And we code those videotapes later for how much are the people moving on the same tempo. It's not just mirroring each other, but that their movements are on the same tempo. And to the extent to which people do share the same tempo in their nonverbal behavior, they later will say, oh yeah, we really clicked, we really got along. And that's above and beyond the positive emotions that they express. And we've also found that in married couples, the more that when there's a longitudinal study that I've been part of that I'll share with you a bit more of in a moment, where we studied married couples over 15 years. And in the very first bit of data that we have from them is from a 15-minute conversation where they're discussing an area of conflict in their marriage. And in that backdrop, in discussing an area of conflict, there's a lot of shared negativity, as you can imagine, but there's some shared positivity as well. And we've also looked at the degree to which the two members of the couple kind of lean in together at the same time, or smile at the same time, or nod their heads at the same time, at the same tempo, what we call caring synchrony. So there's sort of a warmth to the synchrony, not just a sheer tempo. And we find that that predicts marital satisfaction above and beyond many other predictors. So caring synchrony in the context of a conflict conversation. And in this same study, another thing that we were recording while couples were discussing an area of conflict, we were measuring their heart rate, their sweat gland activity, the time it takes for the pulse wave to go, from their heart to the finger, or the heart to the ear, and the temperature of their finger, and just all these different markers of autonomic nervous system activity, which are really vital to emotional experience. And what we find is that the more couples show synchrony in their nonverbal behavior that expresses positive emotions, the more they show at a physiological level. So I'm just going to walk you through one of our charts here. The first piece of data I'll show from husbands, and then I'll show the same data from wives. And here we have every second of this 15-minute conversation coded for whether at that given second were both the husband and wife expressing positivity, or was one expressing it and one wasn't? Were they both expressing negativity, or was one expressing negativity and one wasn't, and so on. So we have shared positive, positive alone, shared negative, negative alone, and shared neutral. And we're looking here at the degree of linkage in people's physiological responses. So just for the example of heart rate, was one person's heart rate going up and the other one was just kind of staying here? That's not very linked. We're looking in particular at linkage of the form of like they're both heart rates are rising at the same time, falling at the same time, and so on. There's another kind of linkage that's called anti-phase linkage, where one person's goes up and the other one goes down. They're still linked, but they're doing opposite things. We're really talking about that similarity kind of linkage here. And we see that when people share positive emotions, there's more of this linkage. Well, that you might just think that's about emotion, and actually most emotion theorists would predict there would be more linkage for negative emotions because bad is just stronger than good. Negative emotions are just much more intense than positive emotions, but we don't find that. In terms of this linkage in the moment, it's not very, similar linkage is not characteristic of shared negativity, and it's also not characteristic of shared neutral. So these moments where two people are expressing or experiencing positive emotions are actually moments where physiologically the same thing is going on inside of them. And what we see for husbands, we see the exact same pattern for wives. We see the same pattern for midlife adults as for older adults. We see the same pattern if we control for how much people are moving around in their chairs, which is, if you think of the shared positive as possibly being shared laughter, the amount of that they move around in their chairs is important to control for because you want to make sure it's not just a big respiratory change or a big movement change. And the effect is still holds in that circumstance too. So, I don't know, sometimes my students will say, I'm really geeking out about a very small detail here. Why does it matter if people's physiological patterns move in synchrony? So what? Why does this matter? Well, for one, we found the degree to which these couples showed synchrony in this one 15-minute conversation predicts how satisfied they are with their marriages, how good of a relationship they have. So it's a marker or an index of positive, well-functioning relationships. So at one level you might think, well, that's just sort of re-describing a positive relationship. Why does this matter long term? Well, one of the benefits of this data set that I've been working on is where I spent a sabbatical, part of my sabbatical working at UC Berkeley, going back to this data set that's archived there, was because these couples were followed for 15 years afterwards. And so we can use this marker of this physiological linkage as a predictor of their future health. One of the things I've been arguing is that these micro moments of positive connection are like health behaviors. And what we see is these were couples who started the study in midlife or late in life. And so over 15 years, their health trajectories are going to get worse. So have chronic illness on the side, up is more chronic illness. Couples who show low positivity resonance, the wives in these couples show increased health problems over 15 years. And over the same time span, which again is midlife to late life, we see that those with higher positivity resonance, again in this one 15-minute conversation, are showing a buffering of that increase in chronic illness. So it seems to be health protective to have these good relationships. Now, we've known that from other areas of psychology and sociology, that being socially integrated is as good a predictor of your longevity as is whether you smoke 6 packs of cigarettes a day. Well, maybe that's a lot, maybe 3 packs a day. Or being obese, or being sedentary. Those are all risks that will shorten your life, but being socially isolated is just as much of a risk. Now, socially isolated to me sounds like one of those statuses. Do you have these relationships or not? And so what I've been bringing to this is to look at, well, what's happening in the moment? Why would having positive connections be so powerful, predictive of our physical health? But probably more proximal than our physical health is the connection of these moments of positivity resonance to our mental health. And these data are from the connection we've seen between positivity resonance and what's called flourishing mental health is it's not just being happy, but it's also feeling like your life has direction, that you have an important contribution to make to society. So it's both kind of a feel-good and a do-good part of happiness, if you will. And these are from every interaction people have, not just with their spouse, but we have people give a sort of an archaeological dig into a person's day in their life, and we ask about every single interaction they had with another person and rate the degree to which they felt attuned, connected, in sync. And we find that when people perceive positivity resonance, that's really highly correlated with their flourishing mental health. It's highly correlated with low levels of depression, low levels of loneliness, and low levels of just illness symptoms, headaches, colds, flus, and so on. And so it's from this kind of research that I argue that positivity resonance is a health behavior, just as much as being physically active or eating your fruits and vegetables, that these sorts of everyday connections, which are always possible for us, are really a really potent, overlooked source of physical health. And the great thing about them is that they are forever renewable. Opportunities to connect with others in a positive way are as nearby as the next person and as close as, or as quick to occur as a shared smile. So these are not things that are way off and hard to figure out how to get them into your life. But still, when you think about how and to prioritize positivity, there are a few cautions that I think are worth registering. One is that it's really well documented now that you can't fake positivity. There is that phrase, fake it till you make it. And at one level, it can be a toehold on, as long as it gets to a genuine emotion, then it can be useful. But when positivity is used as a mask to cover over darker feelings, then it doesn't fool anybody. It doesn't fool others. I mean, humans are amazing sincerity detectors. And so we can tell when other people are not genuine and sincere in their positivity. And there's some special tricks to make sure that you have the best data at hand. One is to make eye contact with somebody. If you're not quite sure what somebody is feeling, if you make eye contact with them, that helps your brain kind of mimic what's going on in their brain, and that kind of can inform your gut about, oh, that's not a genuine smile. That's somebody who's trying to take advantage of the situation. So that's how we kind of can tap into our gut wisdom, is by making eye contact. When we don't make eye contact, we don't have access to that gut wisdom. So others can tell when our positivity is not sincere, but also your body can tell. There are really fascinating studies to show that when people have a forced or insincere smile, that's potentially just as damaging to the heart as expressing contempt or hostility. Okay, so it's not that it's neutral, it can be harmful. Okay, so when we think about prioritizing positivity, we need to think about it from the ground up in authentic ways. What is going to make me feel positive? It's not by just, having the veneer of positivity. So wishful thinking doesn't get us very far here. We have to, think and actually examine our life and examine our days and what is it that brings me joy? What context? What when I'm studying this is what's more passionate. This is sort of part of identifying and understanding your own strengths. Paying attention to how it feels on the inside is the way to go. Another caution I think is really important to point out, although I feel that you at Meredith seem to be particularly well prepared for this, thinking about what's next after you leave Meredith. But the supports for your positivity, as soon as you leave college, they'll be removed. When you stepped onto this campus, you stepped into an environment where there had been people working for decades and days and hours and staying up, planning all summer to make sure you had a good day, to make sure you had a positive first week, to make sure that you had the resources that you need. And when you're wondering, I'm feeling like I need a break from my studying, there's always something there. Okay, that's how colleges have been constructed. But when you leave this structured environment, you need to learn how to feed yourself, to think of this as part of your self-care, is knowing how to put the right balance of experiences on your plate so that you can keep thriving. It's that time after you leave college can actually be a very difficult time because people are realizing, oh, there was all this stuff that was just happening for me. You know, just like when you're living at home, your parents cook your meals, and when you come to campus, somebody else is cooking your meals, and then you have to learn to cook yourself. And sometimes it takes a while before people realize they haven't been making the right choices, and it's affecting their health. So the same is true for learning how to schedule your day and your life, and take every opportunity with connecting with others in order to bring some uplift into your day. So it's not something that can be forced. One of my former doctoral students, who's now a professor at Scripps, used this phrase that I think is so apt. She says it's not inherently impossible to pursue positivity. People get it wrong a lot. They may obsess about whether I'm happy or not, or if I'm not happy all the time, it means something's wrong with me. We have a culture that kind of idolizes happiness, and hasn't been a good thing. But there are ways to focus on prioritizing positivity that help you work with this delicate art. And one of them is that the best way to regulate our emotions is to think about it in advance and select situations that we know are more likely to produce positive emotions in us. And then to go into those situations without thinking, am I happy yet? Am I happy yet? Am I happy yet? But just kind of let them evolve and let the positive emotions surface if they're there. So prioritizing positivity is an individual difference that my students and I have worked on, which is if you ask people if they value positive emotions, everybody says yes. There's no variance in that whatsoever. Where people differ is in when they plan their day, not just putting on things like, I have to do this, this person wants me to do this, and it's all shoulds. Are there some parts of the day that are around enjoyment? So some people do that more than others. They prioritize enjoyment more than others. Or when they think about what job to take or what city to live in, they think about their future happiness. And people who are thinking about their choices in terms of these opportunities that have that experiential turn of including some positivity, they tend to have more positive emotions in daily life. They tend to have higher flourishing mental health, better physical health. And it can be as simple as putting more thought and planning into how your week is going to unfold. What we found that is when people enjoy an experience or even believe that their thoughts about some kind of physical activity are notably positive. This is part of one of my students' dissertations. We find that if people believe their thoughts about a given activity are notably positive, they devote more time to that activity in the following week. And the way to make your thoughts about an activity more positive is to enjoy that activity more. So we can actually create this sort of, I'm drawn to do these positive health behaviors or other things by working with the way positive emotions work and influence our non-conscious thinking. So prioritizing positivity can be as structured as planning your week, or it could be as spontaneous and open as just kind of having a moment of uplift with the person sitting next to you or who you talk to at the reception. So why prioritize positivity? Well, the first and most obvious reaction might be, or the reason might be, it feels good. And feeling good is not frivolous. This is, life is rough sometimes. And so those moments where we can experience a bit of uplift, we shouldn't feel that we are not deserving of those or they're guilty pleasures. We need to be thinking about positive emotions as part of our self-care. And not only do they feel good and offer a respite from difficult times? There's one art historian who's described them in this beautiful way that I love, of their day-to-day micro-utopias. Like these are moments that make us feel alive, engaged, and uplifted, and so we should be favoring those. But also, beyond that, they fundamentally change the way your brain works. They broaden your awareness. And over time, that builds your resources and resilience, grows your intrinsic motivation, and lights the path towards your own mental health and well-being. But that's just the start of it. Why prioritize positivity? It's contagious. Smiles are more contagious than any other expression of emotion. They resonate with others and in others. And they create moments where we and the others that we're with are really experiencing the same emotion as it rolls across your bodies and brains at the same time. Another consequence of shared positive emotions is that builds friendship, it builds community, it grows trust and compassion. Now, these are things that we all agree that we'd like to see more of, but they can sometimes seem mysterious as to how to build them. And they also lights the path towards other people's mental health and physical health. So it's not just about taking care of yourself, it's a way to take care of community at the same time. And so one of the messages I have is that sometimes I think we look too far ahead when we think, how do I make myself more resilient? How do I make my community more compassionate? How do I build trust in this organization or in this school? You know, I think that we can sometimes get lost in looking way too far ahead for these, when in fact the guides to reaching those lofty goals are right here and now in the small lights of positive emotions and positive experience. So thank you for your attention.
Good evening. I'm Andrea McPherson, Assistant Professor of Psychology at Meredith College. Dr. Fredrickson, thank you for sharing your evening with us, and to our audience, I'm so glad that you guys have joined us for this exciting event. We're going to pause now to prepare for the question and answer session with Dr. Fredrickson. As noted in the printed program that you received on the way in, audience members may submit questions on the cards provided. They look like this. If you'd like to submit a question, please pass your card to those that are seated on the aisles, and the cards will be collected now or momentarily. Our question and answer session is going to begin with questions that were written and submitted by Meredith students in advance. If you wish to leave the theater now, please do so respectfully. But we're going to start with some of these questions that we received earlier, and as we continue, we'll keep collecting audience questions, and we'll include as many of those as possible. Because of time limitations, it may not be possible to present all of the questions. So, first question, Dr. Fredrickson. What made you interested in studying love scientifically? And this is from a student at Meredith.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always found fascinating about positive emotions, especially when I was first getting training in emotions research, it was a time when scientists had not been studying emotions at all for decades. If you know psychology, there was a long era of behaviorism, and then the cognitive psychology allowed us to be thinking about, you know, how do thoughts matter? But emotions were very late to be a target of study. And when they first started being a target of study, everything was on negative emotions. There was no research at all on positive emotions. So that's what got me very curious about studying positive emotions. I'm like, they've got to be good for something, and no scientists are talking about this in a systematic way. And so that kind of uncharted terrain is really what drew me in.
So this question is from a faculty member. If I only had time to make one positive change in my life, what would you recommend it to be?
I think the one positive change would be one that wouldn't necessarily require any shift in behavior activities. It would just be, changing your orientation towards every interaction that every person you interact with, towards thinking, boy, this is an opportunity for one of these, mutually uplifting moments that is enjoyable in and of itself, and maybe I've been missing out on those, so to rethink the value of everyday connection, whether it's in the classroom or in the grocery store or, on an airplane. And another that we found to be really powerful is just taking a moment at the end of your day and reflecting how close and in tune you felt with others during that day. Because that sort of regular reflection on connection seems to be enough motivation for people to shift the way they interact with others in ways that raises more positivity and produces benefits.
Another question from a student, and this is the current audience. Are positivity resonance connections strong if they are virtual, like FaceTime, Skype, social media, texting, or is positivity resonance only possible in in-person interactions?
Yeah. When I first wrote about positivity resonance, I thought, well, maybe it doesn't require face-to-face, but I think it requires real-time sensory connection, so that perhaps over voice or with video chat, there'd still be a good chance of experiencing positivity resonance. And then we did some research on this, where we were, dissecting all the different interactions people had across the day, and asked where did they perceive positivity resonance, to the degree to which they did in these different interactions. And we cataloged the telephone and video separate from the like text and email, separate from face-to-face. And the more time you spend face-to-face, the more positivity resonance they feel. There was no association for the FaceTime telephone. So, and actually the more time you spend interacting with people offline, text and email, it was negatively associated with positivity resonance. So one of the reasons I think it's a bit off is there's so much that goes into face-to-face interaction, but one piece of it is that it's just much easier to include things like touch or more spontaneous gestures. You have much more visual data than just someone's face on a screen. And also it's very hard to make that eye contact proper on a video chat, because the camera is not coming out of your eyes or going into their eyes. There's always a bit off. And so it's a little bit more like, you get a little bit of that temporal information from the other, but not the same as face-to-face.
So a community question. Is it true that people are genetically predetermined to a certain level of happiness?
There is some truth to there being genetic or heritability to people's happiness levels. But it's more like a strand of influence. So I think of it as people might have a bit of a set point of where their temperament or where their just predispositions to be more lighthearted or serious. But everybody also has a range. And so when you are increasing your positivity, you're basically charting out to be at the top of your own range. You're not necessarily going to become, move from being the most dour person to the most happy-go-lucky person, but you'll be at the top of your own range. And that's really what matters.
So a student wants to know, how do you recognize negative people or negative relationships? How do you deal with them?
Yeah, one of the things I think can be useful is to adopt a strategy of, it's kind of like the martial arts, Aikido, where you recognize that somebody else's negativity doesn't have to become yours, and to find a way to just respectfully kind of reorient things, or sometimes you can't. Sometimes someone's just going to be negative. And so you can use that as a challenge to say, okay, how can I interact with this person the way that I need to, because maybe I depend on them in my job or working on a team with them, but not let it become your own emotions at the same point. You know, to realize that you can choose which emotions you want to catch and engage in, and that you don't have to be a sponge to other people's negativity.
So another question from a student. We've talked tonight about numerous benefits of positivity, but the question is asking, what happens if you're rejected in love? Are there physical health consequences?
Yeah. You know, the one thing I really enjoy about rethinking love in terms of these micro moments of positivity resonance is that they're not just experienced within our romantic relationships. And so if they are the elemental building block of love, then, and they are possible to experience with almost anybody, that's when we're rejected in one place, we can experience these health beneficial moments of connection elsewhere. And so, when my book on love first came out, my publishers wanted to release it around Valentine's Day. And I thought, it's kind of like the anti-Valentine's Day book, because it's not about romance. It's about finding moments of connection in daily life, in any of our interactions. And so it allows us to rethink that love isn't just romance. Although it is true that if you survey people around the world, when you ask them to define love, they say romance and commitment. And I think that's, it kind of puts blinders on us all to make us feel that, if we don't have that romantic relationship, then we're loveless. And so I think that is, it's kind of a collapse of imagination about what our life could be.
So we've got two questions that have sort of a similar vein. One is from a student and the other is from a faculty. But I took your positivity quiz, and instead of the recommended 3-to-1 ratio, positive to negative, my ratio was reversed. Do you have advice for how to change my mindset and find more balance between the two, transforming my negative thinking into positive?
Well, one of the things to recognize is that most people who would take the positivity self-test would come out less than the ideal 3-to-1. Most of us in American society are not in that above 3-to-1 zone. It's actually really kind of sobering, humbling to recognize. So I don't think that scoring lower than you might hope is necessarily puts you in a minority at all. But what I hope that even just taking that measure repeatedly can kind of keep just like thinking about connection at the end of every day can kind of remind you that, connection is something I'm valuing and I want to have more of. Even just recognizing the 10 different kinds of positive emotions that you might experience as like, that's an opportunity for today. And it actually is, I think, really encouraging that when negativity is registering, because again, sometimes people want to just like, I never feel negative, and then their score really doesn't reflect reality. So I praise the question answer for being honest on the questionnaire, and just kind of keep track of where those little sources of negative emotion come in, and realize that we all have much more control of steering ourselves around those situations. Sometimes negativity is unavoidable, and sometimes it's exactly what we have to feel. But a lot of it is potentially gratuitous when we're overly ruminating about something that, thinking about it further isn't going to make it better, or being super anxious about some future thing that may never happen. So sometimes our mental habits of time travel get us stuck in these loops of negativity that really don't have to do with the circumstances that we're actually facing. And so that's one thing that's really important to kind of use it as a tool to get some insight about one's mental habits.
So we have time for one more question, and I'm going to end on a question from a community member.
Okay.
First, they'd like to say thank you for your talk. But the question is more of a personal question for you. How do you prioritize positivity in your life?
Well, what I've learned is that it's good to be able to have time with my family, time with nature, time with, especially with my work, time for writing. That's the part that I enjoy the most. And so sometimes if I feel a little off, I realize, oh, it's time to have a family meal or a family outing, or it's time to have a little bit more time in nature. One of the big restorative activities for me is just being able to hike in the woods or go for a jog in the woods. My kids will tell you that my jogging is slower than most people's walking, so it's hard for me to use the word jog, but it's what I like to think I'm doing.
Well, we would like to thank Dr. Fredrickson again for sharing her time with us this evening. I would like to invite you all to join us for a reception in Johnson Hall Rotunda with Dr. Fredrickson if we want to continue this dialogue. Thank you for attending the Woman of Achievement 2018.